Today, we're going to be going over every single tip and trick that we've come across for building ProGCC controllers. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. To begin, you'll need your V3, a screw kit, a button set, a handle grip set, a base controller set, your extreme rate set, membrane set, a set of sticks, and finally your shoulder button ribbon cable. To begin, let's go ahead and grab our controller base set. We'll need to grab a few parts from this bag. We're going to need the middle frame of the controller as well as the bracket that the trigger and bumper buttons sit on. We'll want to go ahead and leave all the other parts aside. Inside the little baggie, we're going to need the light pipe and the button for the top as well as the cradle that holds them in. We're going to need the cradle for the home button. And we're also going to need the light pipe for the bottom, as well as the two pins that'll sit inside of the trigger buttons. Once you've got all those parts set aside, you can go ahead and grab your ribbon cable. Let's begin the trigger and bumper button assembly. To start, grab the frame piece that holds the trigger and bumper buttons. We'll also need our ribbon cable. For this, you'll want the gold contacts on the ribbon cable facing upwards as you place the ribbon cable into the frame. Notice there's a plastic tab that you want your ribbon cable to be sitting underneath. Notice there's 4 sections of the ribbon cable, 2 on both sides. We'll move on to the right side first. Grab the lower section of the ribbon cable and lower it down into place. You'll notice that the ribbon cable wants to press up against the plastic. You'll want to go ahead and angle it in such a way that the ribbon cable lays flat underneath the plastic piece and does not stick up. If it sticks up, then you have a chance of catching the metal rod that holds the button in place, and the button just won't feel right. So once again, let's take a closer look at it. You'll notice that the ribbon cable is sitting flat on the bottom underneath the plastic. Just as a better visual here, we turned up the brightness, and using this X-Acto knife you can see right where we're talking about. You'll want to sit down flat underneath this piece of plastic. You'll notice that the top bit of the ribbon cable simply sits over a peg and then it's hinged down over a locking tab. You'll want to repeat this process on the other side. Once you have all 4 positions of your ribbon cable secured down, we'll want to go ahead and grab our bag of membranes and grab the 4 membranes for the ribbon cable. 2 will have the long legs coming out of the bottom, and 2 will just be flat membranes with 2 holes in them. The membranes with the legs simply get poked through the plastic holes and pulled all the way through. You'll repeat this for both sides. The other membranes have a hole as well as a rectangle in them. We'll want to put the hole directly over the peg and then use the rectangle to lock the entire membrane in place. We'll want to go ahead and do this on both sides as well. Now we can begin to put the buttons in place. We'll start with the L and the R buttons. You'll see that there's a tab on the buttons that needs to be placed inside the frame of the black plastic. From there, the button simply just snaps into place. You should be able to feel a nice springy click from there. Repeat that on the other side. Once again, you'll notice if you don't put it in correctly, the button will not go down all the way. To fix this, you can simply just bend the button backwards, it'll unsnap slightly, and then slide it back into place and it'll re-snap in place. Now you have your L and your R buttons securely in place. For the LT and the RT, you'll need the buttons as well as the metal hinges from the original base controller set. You'll notice that there's a hole located right near the base of the button that you'll want to slide the metal rod through. You know it's fully in place when it lines up with the wall of plastic located right to the right of the pin. You'll also know it's fully in place when you can't press it in anymore. Once again, we'll go ahead and repeat this process for the right hand side as well. Now, let's discuss shell preparation. Having built over 50 of these ProGCCs at this point, I've noticed that extreme right shells almost always have a binding issue with the capture and minus buttons. This is because the posts that the buttons sit on seem like they're too high up and cause friction in the shell. So to resolve this, we'll take an X-Acto knife or a hobby knife, and we're simply going to run the knife over the edges that the button sits on. For the capture button, it'll be the two horizontal posts. You'll simply want to scrape them down for a minute or two until the button has some more room in the shell. For the minus button, you'll want to scrape the rounded sections and simply get it down just enough to where the button rides well. Once you've finished modifying the shell, you can go ahead and place your buttons into the shell. Go ahead and make sure that none of them feel like they're binding or sticking in any way, as now's the time to check for that. Once you've got all of your buttons in place, you can go ahead and place their membranes over top of them. Make sure everything's aligned correctly and press down, as you don't want any of your buttons to feel off or weird. For the home button, there's a tab of plastic. You want it to be facing upwards when you place the membrane into the shell. Now we can grab our white controller board. This is our button contact board. This will simply get placed down over the buttons. This has all of our button contacts as well as the LEDs. Notice these two screw posts here. These are very important and you want to pay attention to them as you place your trigger assembly onto the front half. You'll want to make sure that your ribbon cable doesn't get bound and twisted in front of these screw holes. Notice how you can see directly through to the screw hole without the ribbon cable sitting in front of it. From here, we can go ahead and grab our set of screws and begin to screw down all 4 screws that hold this side together. Now that we have all 4 screws holding this side together, let's go ahead and unlock the locking tab and slide our ribbon cable into the connector. You'll want to gently place the ribbon cable in front of the connector before gently sliding it in. Once it looks like it's inserted, you can go ahead and lock the locking connector back down. You now have the front half of your ProGCC completely assembled. Let's move on to the back half. Now that we've got the front half of our controller assembled, let's move on to the back. First, we'll need our light pipe, our button, and the gate, as well as our light pipe for the bottom. The gate will hold in the button and the light pipe at the top of the controller. To begin, you put the button into its slot and you'll notice that it sticks out at the top of the controller. You'll want to go ahead and press it back in very slightly just so that the gate will sit over it. With the light pipe, you'll want to do the same thing. There's a smaller point at the bottom that'll sit inside of the channel, and then the light will stick through the plastic out to the other side. This is followed up by the gate that will sit over both of the light pipe and the button and hold them down with a screw on either side. Notice that it needs to sit down over the center peg. Now, we can go ahead and grab our main blue PCB and place it into the back half of the shell. You'll want to place a USB-C port into its slot first. From there, the rest of the board should simply just fall down into place. The board is secured down by 3 screws, as well as 1 screw and the light pipe down at the very bottom. The light pipe simply gets placed in front of the slots in the shell. There, with light pressure, you should be able to see the points of the light pipe slide down into the shell and seat properly. From there, you can go ahead and insert your screw. From here, we can also place our sticks onto the stick boxes. This will be followed up by using the motor mounts provided with each kit. You'll simply want to take the backing off of the rumble motor and place the rumble motor with the wires facing upwards in the motor mount. This is so that the wires are facing upwards and away from any of the plastic ridges near the motors. This will help prevent any damage to the wires. It's not super critical, but it is an important small detail. Repeat the same process on the other side. Our final touch to make the rumble motors feel perfect is to use some foam stripping just over the top of the rumble motors. We use 6mm wide by 3mm tall foam tape. We simply just cut out a square of it and place it directly onto the rumble motor. This will help ensure that you have a good feeling rumble, as well as it'll soften up any violent rumbles. Now we can go ahead and connect our ribbon cable in preparation for the final step of assembly. Notice you'll want the blue side of the ribbon cable facing upwards when you plug it into the controller. Unlock the locking tab near the bottom of the controller and slide the blue section of the ribbon cable into the controller. You'll notice that it's fully inserted when you press the locking tab down and you can't see any more of the blue. From here, you'll want to fold it roughly 4 times, once down, backwards, back towards the top of the controller again, and one final bend backwards again. This will make it so that the metal contacts on the ribbon cable are facing upwards. It should have an almost spring sort of look. This will get us ready to install the top half of our controller onto the bottom half. We're now ready to go ahead and assemble our 2 halves. Now there are a few points of note here that we'll want to pay attention to. The first being these pegs that screws will go into. We'll want to make sure that they go into the holes in the shell and line up well. You may have to snap them in place as you're assembling, so just pay close attention to those areas. Looking at it from the side, you can now see why we bent the ribbon cable in that way. because once again, you'll want the blue section of the ribbon cable facing upwards on the white PCB. Having the ribbon cable bent this way will always have it line up correctly. You'll simply want to repeat the exact same process as the bottom ribbon connector by plugging it in fully so that you don't see any more of the blue when you lock the connector down. Once you're sure that the ribbon cable is fully inserted, you can go ahead and begin to put your two halves of the controller together. You may have to wiggle the sticks back and forth just to get the controller to seat correctly. Once again, make sure you press down on those two sections where those posts are, and make sure they're seated well. From here, we can go ahead and begin to put in the 5 screws that hold the two halves of the controller together. There's 2 located near the top, 2 on either side of the controller, and 1 down at the very bottom. Once you've got those 5 screws inserted, now's the time to test every single one of your buttons and make sure they all feel well and good. If any of them don't feel good, now's the time to go in, change membranes, reseat everything, and make sure you get it feeling good. You don't want to have your controller fully assembled just to find out one of your buttons isn't working well. Now, once you've checked all that, we can go ahead and put on the back plate. There's simply 4 screws that hold it down. After we've got the back plate screwed on and all the buttons tested one more quick time, we can go ahead and grab our 2 grips. They simply slide on to the controller. From there, our last step is to install the 1 screw per grip. Please note that these may be misaligned from the screw holes in the controller, so you may have to put the screw in at an angle to get it to thread. Once you've got both screws in, you now have a fully assembled ProGCC controller that's up to handheld Legend specifications. And that's all there really is to it. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down below in the comments, or join our Discord link down below. If you'd like to see this in written form, please check out our wiki link down below. And as always, thank you for watching.